I'm South Shore Press News Director Stefan Mihailu, joined by former Congressman George Santos. George, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Stefan?
Life is great. So many people woke up Monday morning to a Truth Social post about President Trump saying all those pardons that Joe Biden supposedly signed with an auto pen, they are moot, gone. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I keep my pen handy for a reason, and it's a nice pen, as you can see. I think it's very simple. When in doubt, put a wet signature on it. As somebody who served in office, Stefan, we often used the auto pen in my office because I had my chief of staff, and my chief of staff would, sign certain things for me, and absolutely not bills. All my bills introduced and co-sponsorships were wet signature. To the best of my knowledge, I've always signed every bill. However, when it comes down to certain, letters, my chief of staff just ran it by me and I said, sure, fine. And he'd put the auto pen on there. That being said, I do think there needs to be a level of discretion and a level of acknowledgement of the principal signature or signature that he or she acknowledged and was well debriefed in the matter subject. And the question here is that Joe Biden, in his final days as president, was unaware of what his handlers were doing with his auto pen signature. And that's where the big question is, and where I believe President Trump is now going to try to set a precedent in the courts.
So do you think this could be basically a plumbing operation, try and flush out whether or not Joe Biden at the very end of his presidency even knew about these pardons, and that some staffer said, hey, auto pen it? Is that really the goal here, do you think?
I think that's the goal. I think the problem is that we all saw this president was checked out at the final stages and days of his presidency, especially after that blow defeat that Donald Trump delivered to Democrats and Kamala Harris. So it almost feels like retribution in some sorts of like, you know what, screw this. And we saw that with the Hunter Biden pardon. We saw that with the J6. And then with the entire Biden family, all of these pardons just don't make sense based on what President Biden said himself several times. Now, excluding the Hunter Biden pardon, which we've now established he did want that pardon. He simply lied to the American people saying he didn't. Everything else is up for question because he never really fought back. And look, in the midst of all this questioning, he's still not fighting back. So silence sometimes is consent, Stefan.
So do you think, George, and let's play, advanced political chess rather than a game of rudimentary checkers. Is this along the lines of President Trump saying, okay, maybe we should have congressional hearings on whether or not Joe Biden was aware of these pardons? Who authorized them? Who authorized the auto pen? So more about that and less about, okay, these pardons are legitimate or not.
Well, I think it's going to be an investigation, and I think a congressional investigation would shed so much light into what was really happening in the Biden admin, specifically those last 60 days of that presidency. So I would say a great oversight investigation into this. I'd love to know which was the staffer who logged into AutoPen and clicked sign. Was it the chief of staff? Was it just some, advisor? Who signed those pardons? We need to know. I think the American people deserve to know, because if it wasn't at the president's direction, if there's no memo, email, or acknowledgement in writing form to go ahead and sign those pardons, I think they're moot, and that these people should not only are, but should be susceptible to investigation into the corruption of the unselect January 6th committee that weaponized Congress against the United States of America's citizens and Donald Trump when he was still a private citizen.
Because, George, isn't that really the $64,000 question? Not whether or not Joe Biden used an auto pen or a signature, because it does appear to be an auto pen, an automatic signature, but whether or not he actually authorized those pardons themselves.
Yes, that's the caveat here is, did Joe Biden even know he was pardoning Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger? The reality is nobody knows. Benny Thompson, as the chairman of the January 6th committee, committed crimes. He destroyed evidence and did not do the appropriate congressional archival process to keep all the documents intact. It is a weaponized committee. all who partook should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and potentially even tried for treason. They worked against American citizens. They targeted 1,600 or so American citizens, put them through hell. Many took their lives because of the work of that committee. People committed suicide, Stefan. I think justice needs to be served, and people like Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson and Adam Kinzinger and now Senator Schiff need to be held accountable for all the acts and crimes they did against American citizens.
So what happens next, George? Is this going to wind up being in court basically on the validity of whether or not a president can use an auto pen or their own hand in signing a pardon?
I think the auto pen question is without a doubt. There's precedent. Presidents have used auto pen. President Trump has used auto pen. President Biden, Obama, Bush. It's been used now for many, many years, and it's spanned 4 presidents already. So the question is not the auto pen. The question is the validity, acknowledgement, and knowing authorization from the commander in chief at the time the auto pen signature was used. I mean, just look at some of these pardons. I do not believe, Stefan, like many Americans, that there was any acknowledgement or participation from President Joe Biden in pardoning the unselect January 6th committee. And I think that's going to come out unless people are willing to perjure themselves in a congressional hearing and face steep jail time in doing so.
Last question for you, George, because the president's a smart cookie. And isn't this along the lines of like a really good lawyer never asking a question in court unless they know the answer? So, thinking 15 steps ahead, I mean, do you think the Trump administration knows something by throwing this out there already about these pardons?
I mean, I think Pam Bondi is a very capable and intelligent attorney general. And I think Kash Patel is a very articulate FBI director. These guys would not let President Trump move on this if they didn't know something. So I go with the statement of lawyers only ask questions they know the answers to just to get ahead of an issue. And I think the reality here is President Trump knows he has a shot at this and he will set precedent. Make no mistake, there will be precedent set here. And I think this will change forever the absolute power of the pardon moving forward. That being said, I think it's important to highlight that this is not President Trump trying to undo pardons. So much so, he's not touching the Hunter Biden pardon. The reality here is it's about unelected staffers who take advantage of digital tools such as the auto pen. I think that is the big problem here. I think the auto pen should also be relegated to a maximum of 1 person outside of the president, which is the chief of staff. And that's the new precedent that needs to really be instilled. At the absence of the president, but at the command of the president, the chief of staff should have the ability to go ahead and expedite work by using the auto pen, but not just have it available for the entire White House to be nilly-willy using it, as some are speculating and suspecting took place during the Biden admin.